Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku was trained by Deadpool in combat and chaos. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The Tuesday had started like any other Tuesday, which is to say, it was awful. It ended with the acrid taste of sludge in his mouth, the scorch marks of Bakugo's explosions on his uniform, and the weight of a dozen pro-heroes' scorn pressing down on his shoulders. But the absolute worst part, the part that hollowed out his chest and left a cold, dead thing in its place, was the silence on the rooftop. All Might, his hero, the symbol of peace, the man whose smile could chase away any shadow, had stood before him in a cloud of steam and withering truth. Without a power, can I be a hero? The skeletal man that remained, Toshinori Yagi, had been kind in his delivery, but the words were surgical, cutting away the last vestiges of Izuku Midoriya's childhood dream. No. Be realistic. Become a police officer. It was a good dream, but it wasn't for him. Now Izuku walked. He didn't know where he was going, only that it was away from that rooftop, away from the crowds, away from the mocking sneer of Kaken that still echoed in his ears. If you want to be a hero so bad, why don't you take a swan dive off the roof and pray for a quirk in your next life? His feet, operating on some forgotten autopilot, led him down a labyrinth of side streets and forgotten alleyways. The setting sun painted the Muzidafu skyline in hues of bruised orange and purple, casting long, distorted shadows that looked like grasping claws. The air was thick with the city's evening breath, exhaust fumes, sizzling street food, and the faint, metallic tang of an approaching rain. His yellow backpack felt like it was filled with lead bricks, each one a different failure from the day. His burnt notebook, fish from the koi pond, was a damp, pathetic lump inside. Hero Analysis for the Future, number 13. What a joke. He ducked into a particularly narrow alley, a shortcut he sometimes took to avoid the main thoroughfare. It was a grimy chasm between two featureless buildings, smelling of damp concrete and overflowing dumpsters. Graffiti covered the brick walls in a chaotic mural of clashing colors. It was here, in the gloom, that he finally allowed himself to stop. His shoulders slumped, the backpack slid to the ground with a soft thud, and the tears he'd been holding back since the rooftop finally came. They weren't loud, gasping sobs. They were silent, hot tears that tracked clean paths through the grime on his cheeks. He leaned against the cold brick wall, sliding down until he was sitting on the cracked pavement, his knees drawn up to his chest. It was over. A 15-year-old dream, dead in a forgotten alley. He was useless. Deku. A quirkless, worthless Deku. Maybe Kaken was right. Maybe he should just. The air shimmered. It started as a subtle distortion, like heat haze rising from asphalt, but it quickly intensified. The space in the middle of the alley began to ripple and warp, the graffiti on the far wall twisting into nauseating spirals. A low hum vibrated through the ground, growing into a deafening buzz that made Izuku's teeth ache. The air crackled with static, and the smell of ozone and, bizarrely, deep-fried tortillas filled his nostrils. Then came the sound. It was not an explosion. It was a wet, percussive, utterly indescribable noise, like a dump truck full of chimichangas driving at full speed into a wall made of gelatin. A ragged, shimmering hole tore open in the fabric of reality itself. It wasn't a clean circle, but a violent, glitching tear, flashing with colors that had no names. And something was violently ejected from it. A figure clad in a skin-tight suit of red and black shot out of the portal like a human cannonball. It cartwheeled through the air with a distinct lack of grace, flailing and screaming something that sounded suspiciously like, "Should have taken that left turn at Albuquerque," before crashing with a sickening crunch into a large, green metal dumpster. Crumple clang! The portal snapped shut behind it with a sound like a thunderclap, leaving only a lingering scent of cinnamon and gunpowder. Silence descended upon the alley once more, broken only by the drip-drip-drip of water from a leaky pipe. The figure was a heap of limbs tangled at impossible angles, half in and half out of the now heavily dented dumpster. One leg was bent backwards at the knee, a shard of white bone peeking through the red fabric. Dark, wet patches were spreading rapidly across the suit, and a small arsenal of weapons, pistols, knives, and what looked like a pair of katanas, were scattered across the pavement. Izuku was frozen. His grief, His despair, his entire world-shattering crisis was shoved violently aside by the sheer, unadulterated weirdness of what he had just witnessed. His mind, the same one that could analyze a hero's quirk in seconds, struggled to categorize this. A villain? A new hero? A teleportation quirk gone horribly wrong? The figure groaned. A muffled voice came from behind the full-face mask. Note to self, when a floating eyeball in a pimp hat tells you not to mess with the TVA's sacred timeline, maybe, listen. The figure tried to push itself up, but its arm bent in a way arms were not meant to bend. It collapsed back with another groan, and then Izuku's legs moved. It was the same stupid, reckless instinct that had sent him running towards the sludge villain. His brain was screaming at him, danger. Unknown quirk. Possible villain. Heavily armed, but his feet were already carrying him forward. He stumbled over a loose paving stone, catching himself before he fell, and approached the crumpled man. Hey, are you okay? Izuku stammered, his voice thin and reedy. Should I call a hero? An ambulance? The masked head lolled to the side, the white, expressive eye patches on the mask somehow focusing on him. One was wide, the other a slit, conveying a look of critical appraisal. Whoa there, audience! The man rasped, his voice a gravelly baritone that seemed to be addressing the graffiti-covered wall behind Izuku. Get a load of this kid. We've crash-landed in the middle of a shonen anime. Green hair, freckles, big ol' innocent eyes. He's got more main character vibes than a guy with spiky hair and an oversized sword. Izuku blinked. Hey, audience? Shonen? I don't understand. The man ignored him, still talking to the empty air. Yeah, I know. Fourth wall break in the first 5 minutes. But can you blame me? The production value here is great. Look at the detail on that crumbling brickwork. Chef's kiss. He coughed, a wet, gurgling sound, and a fresh splash of crimson appeared on the black part of his mask. Okay, maybe a little less internal monologuing, a little more, not dying. He turned his masked gaze back to Izuku. Name's Deadpool. And to answer your question, kid, okay is a strong word. I'm more artistically disassembled. An ambulance would just get lost, and a hero would probably try to arrest me for illegal weapons, illegal suit tightness, and illegally being this handsome under the mask. Which, trust me, I am. Ryan Reynolds level. You can write that down. Izuku's hero analyst brain, desperate for something familiar to cling to, tried to process the information. Codename Deadpool. Quirk, unknown, possibly teleportation or dimensional travel. Mental state, unstable. Prone to delusions, speaks to non-existent people. Also, severe injuries. The bone sticking out of his leg was a compound fracture of the tibia. The dark stains looked like multiple gunshot wounds. No normal person would be conscious, let alone cracking wise. Why your leg? It's broken! And you're bleeding everywhere! Izuku said, his voice trembling with a mixture of fear and concern. He took another step closer, his hands fluttering uselessly. We have to do something. Relax, Green Bean. I've got this, Deadpool said. He grabbed his bent leg with both hands. This is the part where the squeamish viewers might want to look away. With a grunt of effort and a sound like celery sticks being snapped in a blender, Deadpool wrenched his lower leg back into alignment. Izuku flinched, a wave of nausea washing over him. The bones slid back under the fabric with a wet squelch. Deadpool let out a long, pained hiss. Gah! Always hurts more than I remember. He wheezed. But hey, at least it's not the, down there region. Had a run-in with a rabid badger once. Took weeks to walk right. Izuku watched, utterly horrified and morbidly fascinated, as the torn fabric of the suit seemed to slowly knit itself back together. Underneath, the flesh was visibly healing. He could see the bulge of the bullet in his shoulder pushing its way out before the skin sealed over, leaving behind only a faint, puckered scar that faded to nothing in seconds. Why your quirk? Izuku breathed, his eyes wide. It's a high-speed regeneration quirk. Like recovery girls, but on yourself. And without the stamina drain. That's incredible. Is it cellular? Does it affect your brain cells too, which could explain the cognitive eccentricities? How fast is the mitosis? Could you regrow a whole limb? What are its limits? Is it vulnerable to carbonadium? Oh, wait, that might not be a thing here. He slapped a hand over his mouth, horrified that his analytical muttering had escaped. Deadpool pushed himself into a sitting position, his movements still stiff but rapidly becoming more fluid. He slowly rotated his newly healed arm. The white patches on his mask widened in what Izuku could only interpret as surprise and delight. Holy chimichangas! Deadpool said, pointing a finger at Izuku. You! I like you? You're a little nerd, aren't you? A bona fide, 100% organic, free-range nerd. Most people just scream and run away. You started trying to reverse engineer my powers. What's your name, kid? Izuku Midoriya. Izuku Midoriya. Deadpool repeated, testing the name. He looked around the alley, then back at Izuku. Well, Izuku Midoriya, it seems I've had a bit of a transportation malfunction. He patted his belt, pulling off a small, smoking device that looked like a busted smartphone duct taped to a garage door opener. The screen was cracked and fizzing with angry-looking sparks. My personalized reality hopping and interdimensional travel system, the PRHITS for short, is on the, well, fritz. Seems that last energy blast from Captain Zorp's doom ray kind of fried the motherboard. He shook the device. It rattled pathetically. So, I'm stuck. Stuck in a world where everyone has superpowers, the art style is super clean, and judging by your school uniform, the high schools have ridiculous funding. As Deadpool stood up, wobbly at first, and began collecting his scattered weapons, Izuku's backpack, which he had dropped earlier, was kicked by his foot. It fell open, spilling its contents onto the grimy pavement. Out tumbled a half-eaten bento box, a few textbooks, and the soggy, pathetic form of hero analysis for the future, number 13. Before Izuku could snatch it back, Deadpool bent down with surprising speed and picked it up. Ooh, what's this? Hero analysis for the future? Someone's ambitious. Mortification washed over Izuku, colder and more intense than his earlier despair. Please don't. It's just stupid scribbling. Deadpool ignored him, flipping through the damp pages with a surprising gentleness. His masked head tilted, the expressive eyes of his mask narrowing and widening as he scanned the detailed drawings, the complex notes, the tactical breakdowns. He saw the page on Kamui Woods, with notes on his vulnerability to fire and wide-open spaces. He saw the entry on Empty Lady, analyzing how her gigantification quirk made her a huge target with limited maneuverability in dense urban environments. He even saw the double-page spread on All Might, filled with reverent praise but also sharp observations about his time limits, which Izuku had been noticing long before the rooftop confession. The alley was silent for a full minute, the only sound the distant wail of a siren. Izuku held his breath, expecting mockery. He was waiting for the laugh, for the same dismissive sneer he got from Kaken. Stupid, creepy Deku, stalking heroes and writing in his little notebook. But Deadpool didn't laugh. He closed the notebook and held it out to Izuku. His posture had changed. The lazy, pained slump was gone. He stood straighter, a strange intensity in his stance. Kid, he said, his voice stripped of its usual manic energy. It was quiet, serious, and it made Izuku's skin prickle. This isn't scribbling. This is professional-grade threat assessment. This is tactical genius. I know guys in S.H.I.E.L.D. who get paid 7 figures for reports half as detailed as this. You broke down Endeavor's fighting style and identified 3 new potential applications for his quirk that the guy himself probably never even thought of. And this one on Eraserhead, you correctly deduced his fighting style is based on minimizing line-of-sight exposure and quirk use windows. Holy crap. He tapped the cover of the notebook. This is a superpower, Izuku Midoriya. A big, beautiful, squishy brain power. He looked from the notebook to Izuku's hopeful, terrified face. So, let me guess. You want to be a hero, but everyone tells you that you can't because you didn't win the genetic lottery. Am I warm? Izuku could only nod, his throat tight. Deadpool sighed, a long, theatrical sound. He began to pace the narrow alley, his movements becoming more and more energetic as his body finished healing. Ah, the classic shonen setup. The underdog protagonist with a heart of gold and a dream bigger than his non-existent powers. The cruel world, personified by a spiky-haired rival, tells him to give up. He's at his lowest point. This is where the wise old mentor is supposed to show up and give him a magical sword or a super-secret power source. He stopped pacing and jabbed a thumb at his own chest. Well, I ain't got a magical sword. And my only secret power source is gluten and rage. But I am a mentor. Sort of. More of a chaotic life coach. He leaned in close, the black eye patches of his mask seeming to stare directly into Izuku's soul. I can't give you a quirk, kid. Powers are a dime a dozen in this town. Everybody and their grandma can shoot lasers or talk to squirrels. But I can teach you something better. Something that this world, with its shiny heroes and their color-coded special moves, has forgotten. What's that? Izuku whispered. Deadpool's voice dropped to a conspiratorial hiss. I can teach you how to be unkillable. Not like me, not with the fancy healing factor. I mean practically unkillable. I can teach you how to take a punch that would shatter a normal man's ribs and get back up laughing. I can teach you how to turn a trash can lid, a half-eaten hot dog, and 3 paper clips into a lethal weapon. Or, a non-lethal disarming device, cause heroism. He straightened up, spreading his arms wide in a grand gesture. I will teach you the art of combat, the science of strategy, and the glorious, beautiful religion of chaos. I'll teach you how to be so unpredictable, so utterly insane in a fight, that your enemy's brains will literally short-circuit trying to figure out your next move. I will make you a hero who doesn't win by overpowering his opponents, but by making them give up out of sheer, unadulterated confusion. The offer hung in the air, electric and impossible. It was a lifeline, but it was a lifeline made of barbed wire and held by a certified lunatic. Every rational part of Izuku's mind screamed at him to run. This man was a mercenary, a killer, probably a villain in whatever dimension he came from. His methods sounded dangerous and unheroic, but All Might's words echoed in his memory. No. Be realistic. This was not realistic. This was the exact opposite of realistic. It was madness. It was insanity. It was a chance. Why? Izuku finally asked, his voice shaking. Why would you help me? Deadpool shrugged, holstering one of his pistols. Couple of reasons. 1. I'm bored. And a 10-month training montage leading up to the UA entrance exam arc sounds like a fantastic way to kill time. 2. You're my only ticket to getting the parts one need to fix the PRHITS. I need a local guide, someone who knows where to find advanced electronics, a decent black market for alien tech, and maybe a 24-hour show stand. And 3. He leaned in again, his voice becoming soft, because I know what it's like. To be a joke. To be broken. To have everyone write you off. And I know the supreme, earth-shattering satisfaction of proving every single one of them wrong. I want to see the look on your spiky-haired rival's face when you use his own explosive sweat to give him a noogie. He stood back and presented his terms. So here's the deal, Midoriya. I train you. I turn you from a sad little cinnamon roll into a weaponized cinnamon roll of doom. In exchange, you help me find parts to fix my gizmo. You keep your mouth shut about the interdimensional mercenary living in your, well, we'll find a place. And you keep me supplied with a steady stream of chimichangas. Extra guacamole. That part is non-negotiable. He stuck out a gloved hand. Izuku looked at that hand. He looked at the grinning, leering mask of the man offering it. He thought of his mother's worried face, of All Might's pity, of Bakugo's contempt. He thought of his broken dream, lying in pieces on a rooftop. This was his chance to pick up those pieces and glue them back together with crazy glue and sarcasm. This wasn't the path of a symbol of peace. It was a different path. A weirder path. A path that led through a dark, graffiti-covered alley and was being offered by a man who talked to an audience that wasn't there. But it was a path. And for the first time since he was 4 years old, it was a path that might actually lead somewhere. He wiped the tears from his face with the back of his sleeve. He took a deep, shuddering breath, the scent of ozone and cooked meat filling his lungs. He reached out and shook Deadpool's hand. His grip was surprisingly firm. Okay, Izuku said. And for the first time all day, his voice didn't stutter. I'll do it. Deadpool's masked eyes crinkled in a grin. He pumped Izuku's hand enthusiastically. Excellent! You've just made the best and possibly worst decision of your life. Welcome to the team! Our colors are red, black, and existential dread. Now, our training begins immediately. All right now? Izuku asked, startled. What's the first lesson? Stance? Footwork? How to properly clean a katana? Nope, Deadpool said cheerfully. He let go of Izuku's hand and his own hand shot out, not in a punch, but in a throw. A brown, lumpy object flew through the air, spinning end over end directly at Izuku's face. Time seemed to slow down. Izuku's eyes widened. It was a half-eaten chimichanga, leaking sour cream. Years of ingrained instinct, the instinct to dodge Kaken's surprise attacks, to avoid bullies in the hallway, to simply not get hit, took over. He didn't think. He reacted. He dropped, twisting his body to the side, and the greasy projectile sailed past his ear, splattering against the brick wall behind him with a wet smack. He ended up on one knee, breathing heavily, staring at the stain on the wall. He had dodged it. Easily. He looked up to see Deadpool giving him a slow, deliberate clap. Lesson 1, Situational Awareness, Deadpool said, his voice full of genuine approval. Always expect the unexpected. Especially when the unexpected is delicious and deep-fried. He cocked his head. You know, for a kid with zero combat training, your dodge reflexes are top-notch. It's like you've spent your whole life avoiding explosions from an angry Pomeranian. Izuku stared at him, dumbfounded. How did you? Lucky guess. Deadpool winked, though Izuku couldn't see it. Not bad, kid. Not bad at all. You've got potential. He slung an arm over Izuku's shoulders, steering him out of the alley and back toward the streetlights of the main road. The weight was surprisingly comforting. All right, my new apprentice. Our first official mission is of the utmost importance. It will test your resolve, your knowledge of the local area, and your commitment to our noble cause. What is it? Izuku asked, his mind reeling. Are we going to stop a robbery? Find a villain's hideout? Don't be ridiculous. We're just getting started, Deadpool said, his tone gravely serious. First, we find a place that sells chimichangas. I am dangerously low on my thinking food. Then, we can talk about turning you into a hero. As Izuku Midoriya walked out of the darkness of the alley and into the light of the street, he wasn't the same boy who had walked in. The despair was still there, a faint echo in the back of his mind, but it was being drowned out by a new, terrifying, and exhilarating feeling. It was a chaotic, unpredictable, chimichanga-scented feeling. It was hope. And it was going to be a very, very weird 10 months. The 10 months that followed were a discordant symphony of pain, confusion, and the overwhelming smell of stale chimichangas. Izuku Midoriya's life, once a predictable, miserable rhythm of school and solitude, was now a chaotic free-fall orchestrated by a madman in a red suit. Their base of operations was a condemned warehouse on the industrial outskirts of Muzurifu, a skeletal giant of rust and corrugated steel. Deadpool had acquired it through what he called aggressive, long-term borrowing. The interior was a cavernous space filled with dust motes dancing in the shafts of light that pierced the grimy skylights. In one corner sat a pile of salvaged electronics, a chaotic mess of wires, circuit boards, and blinking LEDs, which was Deadpool's perpetually failing attempt to repair his portal device. In another corner, a stained mattress, a mini-fridge humming ominously, and a beanbag chair that had seen better decades constituted their lounge. The rest of the space was their dojo. The training began the day after their meeting. Izuku arrived at dawn, clutching a brand new notebook labeled Advanced Combat and Chaos Theory, Volume 1. His eyes bright with nervous determination. He found Deadpool sprawled on the beanbag chair, wearing fluffy pink bunny slippers and a bathrobe over his suit, snoring into a half-empty bag of tortilla chips. Morning, Sensei! Izuku chirped, bowing stiffly. Deadpool jolted awake with a snort. Sensei? Kid, the only thing I'm a master of is procrastination and excessive gore. Call me Wade. Or Mr. Poole. Or the Crimson Comedian. Just don't call me late for dinner, am I right, folks? He gestured to an imaginary studio audience, then squinted at Izuku. You're way too chipper for whatever time it is. First lesson, heroism doesn't start until after coffee. Or in my case, a gallon of chocolate milk and 3 breakfast burritos. This set the tone for the entire 10 months. There was no formal structure, no respectful student-master dynamic. There was only Wade's madness, and Izuku's desperate attempt to learn from it. Months 1 to 2, deconstruction of a hero. Wade's first goal was not to build Izuku up, but to tear him down. He needed to demolish the fragile, idealistic framework Izuku had built his dream upon and replace it with something forged in scrap metal and pain. Their primary training ground was the Takamatsu Municipal Scrapyard, a sprawling, 10-acre tetanus trap that Wade affectionately called the playground. It was a jagged landscape of rusted cars stacked like forgotten toys, mountains of twisted rebar, and precarious towers of crushed appliances. "Welcome," Wade had announced on their first visit, spreading his arms wide. "To the place where dreams and washing machines come to die. Your job is simple. Get from this end to that end." He pointed a kilometer away, to a single, rust-streaked crane that loomed over the junkyard like a gallows. "I will be providing motivational feedback." The motivational feedback came in the form of a high-powered paintball gun, loaded with rounds that felt less like paint and more like frozen, angry hornets. Rule number 1 of the chaos factor. Wade yelled as he opened fire, the thwack-thwack-thwack of the marker echoing through the scrap heaps. "Predictability gets you killed. You're running in a straight line, green bean. That's a rookie mistake. Even the lemmings in that old video game knew to turn at a wall." Splat! A neon-pink paintball exploded against Izuku's shoulder, the impact staggering him. It stung, a sharp, biting pain that radiated down his arm. He yelped and scrambled behind a stack of flattened cars. "Hiding is also predictable." Wade's voice boomed, seemingly from everywhere at once. "Villains love a stationary target. It gives them time to monologue." Izuku's first few dozen runs were a disaster. He was covered in a rainbow of bruises and welts. He tried to be tactical, to move from cover to cover, but Wade was a phantom, always appearing on a higher perch, always finding an angle. Izuku's mind, so adept at analyzing heroes from a distance, froze when he was the one under fire. He was slow, clumsy, and terrified. By the end of the first week, he was ready to quit. He sat nursing a particularly nasty welt on his cheek, his whole body an aching testament to his failure. "What's the point of this?" he asked, his voice thick with frustration. "I'm just learning how to get hit." Wade appeared beside him, sitting down on a rusted engine block. He had his mask pulled up to his nose, revealing a scarred jaw as he chomped on a granola bar he'd found in a wrecked minivan. "Exactly," he said, his mouth full. Izuku stared at him. "What? You think pain is a stop sign?" Wade explained, swallowing. "The world has taught you that when something hurts, you stop. The bully shoves you, it hurts, you stay down. Someone tells you your dream is impossible, it hurts, you believe them. Pain has been your master your entire life, kid. I'm teaching you to make it your bitch." He tossed the granola bar wrapper over his shoulder. "Every hero gets hit. Even All Might. The difference isn't in not getting hit, it's in what you do after you get hit. Do you curl up and cry, or do you spit out a tooth, make a crude joke about the villain's mother, and keep fighting? I'm not teaching you how to dodge paintballs, Izuku. I'm recalibrating your relationship with pain. It's not a command. It's just information. Hey, you've been shot here. That's it. You take that information, you process it, and you move on." Something in that crude, nonsensical explanation clicked. Izuku looked at his bruised hands. All his life, pain had been a signal to retreat. Wade was telling him it was just a signal. The next day, his run was different. He was still hit, dozens of times, but he didn't stop. When a paintball struck his leg, he acknowledged the sharp sting, adjusted his balance, and kept moving. He started to learn the rhythm of the junkyard, the way sound echoed off the metal, the secure and insecure footholds. He stopped thinking about the pain and started thinking about the crane. This new philosophy extended to other, more horrifying lessons. One afternoon, Wade trapped Izuku's arm in a collapsed car door. "All right, you're caught," he said conversationally. "Bad guy's coming. Your arm is stuck. What do you do?" I try to pull it free? Izuku grunted, yanking uselessly. Nope. He's got a gun. No time, Wade said. Option B? Izuku's mind raced. I don't know. Option B, Wade said, his voice flat and serious, is to dislocate your shoulder. Pop it out of the socket, slip your arm free, and reset it once you're clear. It's gonna suck. A lot, but it sucks less than being dead. He then spent a grueling, agonizing hour teaching Izuku the precise, horrifying mechanics of how to voluntarily dislocate and reset his own joints. The first time Izuku managed to pop his shoulder out, the world went white with a pain so blinding he nearly passed out. But Wade was there, guiding him through the breathing, forcing him to focus, and then showing him how to use a wall to slam it back into place. See? Wade said, as Izuku lay gasping and sweating on the ground. Pain is just information. The information right now is, your shoulder feels like it was run over by a freight train full of angry badgers, but you're alive. You escaped. You won. By the end of the second month, Izuku was a different creature. He was still a scrawny teenager, but he moved with a wiry, economical grace. His body was a roadmap of faded bruises, but his eyes held a new, hard-won resilience. He could run the junkyard course in under 10 minutes, the paintballs becoming a rhythmic beat he moved to, not a punishment he fled from. He had learned the first, most important lesson of Deadpool's curriculum. His body was a tool, and pain was just the user's manual. Months 3 to 5, the tools of chaos. With Izuku's body conditioned, it was time to arm him. Wade led him to a large, padlocked crate in the corner of the warehouse. He opened it with a flourish. Inside, nestled in foam, was an arsenal. Behold! Wade declared. The instruments of our orchestra of justice. Izuku's eyes widened. He saw sleek black pistols, combat knives, grenades, and things he couldn't even identify. Wade! I can't use these. Heroes don't kill people. Wade flicked him on the forehead. Did I say kill? Don't put words in my mouth. My mouth is a temple, a holy place reserved for tacos and inappropriate commentary. He rummaged past the lethal hardware. Killing is easy. It's sloppy. It ends the story. A hero's job is harder. You have to win decisively enough that the bad guy can be gift-wrapped for the cops, but not so decisively that you have to fill out a mountain of paperwork and attend mandatory therapy sessions. He pulled out 3 items. The first was a pair of Bakken, heavy, masterfully crafted wooden training swords. The second was a pistol, but lighter than the others. Wade ejected the magazine to show Izuku the cartridges. The tips were thick blue rubber. The third was a compact device that looked like a TV remote with 2 metal prongs at the end, a high-voltage stun gun. Your new best friends, Wade said. Meet Woody, Buzz, and Zappy. We'll work on the names. The training was relentless. Wade didn't teach him kendo. He taught him how to fight with a sword-shaped object. Forget the honorable duels and fancy stances, he'd say, parrying Izuku's clumsy strikes with a crowbar. The goal is to hit the other guy with the hard part until he stops moving. Kneecaps, elbows, hands, collarbone. Anything that breaks or hurts. Disarm. Disable. Demoralize. Hand-to-hand combat was even more unorthodox. Wade called his style Le Chemin du Mille Blaireau Confuse, or The Way of the Confused Honey Badger. It had no forms, no katas. Its core tenets were misdirection, pragmatism, and blatant cheating. Their first sparring session was short and humiliating. Izuku adopted a basic boxing stance he'd seen on TV. Wade ambled toward him, yawning. Izuku threw a textbook jab. Wade didn't block it. He simply took a short step to the side, stuck out his foot, and tripped him. As Izuku fell, Wade tossed a handful of ball bearings he'd been hiding in his pocket onto the floor where Izuku was about to land. Izuku's hand slipped, and he hit the concrete with a painful smack. Before he could recover, Wade had pinned him with a folding chair. Fight's over, Wade said, sitting on the chair that held Izuku down. You were thinking about boxing. I was thinking about winning. See the difference? He taught Izuku to see a fight not as a contest of strength, but as a puzzle to be solved with the most efficient, unexpected solution. He taught him how to use an opponent's momentum against them, how to break a grip by targeting the thumb, how to use a jacket to blind someone, how to throw pocket sand like a seasoned gladiator. Gun training was the most jarring. Izuku had a deep, cultural aversion to firearms. They were the tools of villains, not heroes. "Listen up, Buttercup," Wade said, forcing the rubber bullet pistol into Izuku's trembling hands. "A gun is a tool. This one fires non-lethal rounds. It's basically a high-velocity punching machine. Knowing how to use it doesn't mean you have to kill with it. It just means the other guy is really gonna regret bringing a quirk that only works at close range to a fight with you. It's about controlling the space. It's about having options. And frankly," he added, tapping Izuku's temple, "the biggest reason you're learning this is to get over that terrified look on your face. You can't let a tool scare you. If you understand it, you can fight against it." Izuku learned. He learned to assemble and clean the pistol blindfolded. He learned to shoot with unnerving accuracy, his analytical mind perfectly calculating trajectories. He never grew to like it, but he respected it. It was another piece of the puzzle. Month 6 to 8. Weaponizing the mind. "Physical prowess is great," Wade announced one morning, javeling 3 grenades, which Izuku desperately hoped were dummies. "But it's predictable. The real secret weapon, the one that makes you a legend, is here." He tapped his masked head. "Inside this beautiful, chimichanga-fueled brain pan is the chaos factor. And it's time I gave you the keys to the kingdom." This phase of the training was by far the strangest. It was less physical, more psychological. Wade's goal was to break the linear way Izuku's mind worked and rebuild it to operate on multiple, chaotic tracks simultaneously. The first drill was the monologue. Wade would attack him, and Izuku had to defend himself while delivering a continuous, non-stop monologue on a random topic. "Go!" Wade shouted, swinging a foam noodle at his head. Topic: the socio-economic impact of All Might merchandise on Japan's GDP. The impact is significant," Izuku grunted, ducking. "It creates jobs in, manufacturing and retail, but also potentially stifles, the market for smaller hero agencies who can't compete with the NGH branding." He was clumsy at first, his words coming out in panicked bursts between blocks and dodges. But slowly, he learned to compartmentalize. His body would react, flowing through the defensive movements Wade had taught him, while a separate part of his brain constructed the sentences. "Good," Wade critiqued, sweeping his legs. "But you sound like a textbook. Put some feeling into it. Be distracting." The goal is to make the bad guy so confused or annoyed by what you're saying that he makes a mistake. The next drill was environmental improvisation. Wade would lock them in a location, a mock-up of a convenience store, a library, an office cubicle, and Izuku had to neutralize him using only what was available. In the convenience store, he learned that a stale baguette made a surprisingly effective club, a spray of soda could make a floor slick, and a well-aimed bag of expired chips could create a startling, noisy diversion. In the library, he learned the acoustic properties of throwing a heavy book, the blinding effectiveness of a face full of microfiche dust, and the strategic value of a rolling ladder. But the weirdest part of the mental training was what Wade called feeling the narrative. Wade was constantly talking to people who weren't there. "Can we get a dramatic zoom in on this, please?" he'd say to the ceiling during a particularly intense spar. "And maybe some heroic music? Not the cheap stock stuff, I want the full orchestral score." "Who are you talking to?" Izuku would ask, panting. "The guys in the truck," Wade would reply nonchalantly. "They handle the camera work. A little lazy on the close-ups, but their craft services table is to die for." At first, Izuku wrote it off as a symptom of Wade's accelerated healing affecting his brain. It was just insanity. But then, he started to notice things. Wade would comment on something an instant before it happened. "Oh, I love this part," Wade said one afternoon as they were packing up. "This is where the exhausted student thinks the training is over for the day, but the mentor reveals, one last test." Exactly on cue, a series of training drones Izuku hadn't even known were there activated, their red optic sensors glowing in the dim warehouse. Izuku stared, baffled. "How did you?" "Writer's intuition," Wade had said with a shrug. "You get a feel for the pacing after a while. It felt like we were due for a dramatic reveal. Izuku didn't understand the fourth wall breaking truth. His logical, analytical mind found a different explanation. He concluded that Wade possessed a form of hyperintuition, an unconscious precognition born from his chaotic life. He wasn't breaking the fourth wall. He was just so attuned to the patterns of conflict and narrative causality that he could predict the story beats of a situation. He started calling it narrative analysis in his notebook. He tried to learn it himself, to feel the flow of a fight, to anticipate not just his opponent's next move, but the next event in the encounter. It was a bizarre, almost mystical skill, but under Wade's strange guidance, he began to get the hang of it. Months 9 to 10, synthesis. The final 2 months were about putting it all together. The physical resilience, the combat skills, the mental chaos. Wade's methods became even more unpredictable. He'd wake Izuku up at 3 a.m. by setting off firecrackers in his bedroom. Wade had, to Inko Midoriya's bewildered delight, rented the apartment next door, claiming to be a freelance life coach from America. The test would be for Izuku to get dressed, geared up, and out the window in under 30 seconds. Wade would arrange for them to stumble upon staged crimes, hiring out-of-work actors and stuntmen to play purse snatchers and muggers. Izuku's job was to neutralize them using everything he had learned. His first real field test was a mugging in a park. 2 large men cornered him. The old Izuku would have frozen. The new Izuku's mind went into overdrive. 2 targets. Larger, confident. Overconfidence is a weakness. Environment, park bench, gravel path, fountain, hot dog stand 50 meters away. Just give us the wallet, kid, the first thug growled. Izuku smiled, a slightly unnerving, twitchy thing he was still practicing. A wallet? Sir, in this economy? I conduct all my transactions via an untraceable cryptocurrency stored on a chip in my dental fillings. You'd have to be an orthodontist to rob me, and frankly, you don't look like you have the dexterity. The thugs blinked, confused. That was the opening. He kicked the base of the park bench, sending the backrest swinging up into the second thug's knees. As the first thug stared in surprise, Izuku scooped up a handful of gravel and flung it in his face. The man roared, clawing at his eyes. Izuku moved in, not with a punch, but with a series of quick, precise strikes from his bakken, which he'd had strapped to his backpack. A sharp rap to the wrist made the first thug drop his knife. A jab to the solar plexus knocked the wind out of him. The second thug recovered and charged. Izuku didn't meet him head-on. He dodged, grabbed the man's oversized jacket, and pulled it over his head, blinding him. A quick trip and a stun gun zapped to the thigh later, and both men were groaning on the ground, neutralized. The entire encounter took less than 15 seconds. From a nearby rooftop, Wade gave him a thumbs up through a pair of binoculars. By the 10th month, the transformation was complete. Izuku Midoriya was still a nerd. He still muttered his analyses and fanboyed over heroes. But the stutter was gone. The timid slump in his shoulders was replaced by a coiled readiness. He walked with a quiet confidence that was deeply unsettling to those who knew him. He'd filled out, his scrawny frame now corded with lean, functional muscle from months of constant, grueling exertion. On the eve of the UA entrance exam, he stood with Wade on the roof of the warehouse, looking out at the glittering lights of the city. "You're ready," Wade said. It was the most sincere, straightforward thing he had said in 10 months. Physically, anyway. "The real test is up here." He tapped his own head. "Are you gonna go in there and try to be a miniature All Might, all smash this and justice punch that? Or are you gonna be you? Who am I?" Izuku asked quietly. "You're Izuku Midoriya," Wade said, placing a heavy hand on his shoulder. "You're the kid with a supercomputer for a brain who can take a punch and tell a joke at the same time. You're the guy who can analyze an opponent's weakness while simultaneously convincing them that their shoes are on the wrong feet. You're not the next All Might. You're the first you. You're a weaponized nerd, a combat analyst. A chaotic good gremlin," he grinned, the mask crinkling around his eyes. "You're my masterpiece. Now go in there and make them all so confused they have to rewrite the scoring system." Izuku looked at his hands. They were calloused and scarred, but they felt strong. He felt strong. He wasn't the hero he had always dreamed of being. He was something different. Something stranger. Something forged in a junkyard, trained by a madman, and fueled by a stubborn, unbreakable dream. Tomorrow, he wouldn't just be taking an exam. He'd be making his debut. And the world of heroes had no idea what was about to hit it. The stench of burnt sugar and desperation was a familiar perfume in this part of town, but today it was thicker, choking the air with a palpable sense of panic. Izuku and Wade were walking back from a particularly fruitful procurement mission at a U-Storage facility that had recently gone bankrupt. Wade had insisted that the slightly singed but functional plasma regulators he'd liberated from a forgotten locker were exactly what he needed to fix his portal device. Izuku suspected they were just parts from an old high-end microwave, but he had long since learned not to question Wade's technobabble. That's when they heard the explosions. Not the distant, rumbling booms of a hero fight downtown, but the sharp, percussive crack boom of Bakugo Katsuki's quirk. They were close. "Ooh, someone's having a bad day," Wade chirped, hefting the bag of components over his shoulder. "Sounds like the angry Pomeranian is off his leash." Izuku's heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat of conditioned fear. But something else was there now, a cold, analytical current that flowed over the panic. He scaled a nearby fire escape with a fluid grace that was now second nature, Wade following him with a lazy, almost bored agility. From their perch on the rooftop they saw it, the same shopping district from before. The same crowd of panicked civilians and uselessly posturing heroes. And the same villain. The sludge villain was bigger now, a churning, liquid monstrosity of filth and eyeballs, and at its epicenter, struggling and thrashing, was the unmistakable spiky blonde hair of Kaken. Bakugo was fighting back, setting off uncontrolled explosions within the villain's body, but it was only making things worse, setting fire to the surrounding storefronts and preventing the other heroes from getting close. Death Arms was holding back the crowd. Kamui Woods was struggling with the fire. Empty Lady couldn't fit down the narrow street. It was a tactical nightmare, a perfect storm of mismatched quirks and escalating chaos. Izuku's mind, a finely honed machine of analysis and pain tolerance, went to work. The old him would have been paralyzed by the sight of his childhood tormentor in mortal danger. The new him saw a problem with a set of variables. Threat, amorphous sludge entity. Hostage, Bakugo, Katsuki. Quirk, explosion. High-yield close range. Currently a liability, causing collateral damage and preventing rescue. Pro-hero response, ineffective. Key weaknesses of threat, solidification via impact or rapid temperature change. Vulnerable points, eyes, mouth region where solid body is located. "Well, this is an absolute cluster hug," Wade commented, leaning against the chimney. "The heroes are about as useful as a screen door on a submarine. What you got, Brainiac?" "I'm seeing a couple of options. Option A, we leave, find those chimichangas I was promised, and let Darwinism sort this out. Option B, you go down there and do the thing." Izuku didn't look at him. His eyes were scanning the battlefield, his brain processing data at a furious pace. The fire. The water from the fire hydrants turning to steam. The villain's fluid body. An idea, insane and dangerous, began to form. A plan that wasn't about power, but about physics. "The heroes are focused on the wrong problem," Izuku muttered, more to himself than to Wade. "They're trying to fight the sludge. They need to incapacitate it. And how does our little non-powered protagonist plan to do that?" Wade asked, a note of genuine curiosity in his voice. Izuku pointed. Across the street, mounted on the wall of a noodle shop, was a large, industrial-grade fire extinguisher. The red canister gleamed in the firelight. "That," Izuku said. "Carbon dioxide. Rapid depressurization causes a drastic drop in temperature. If I can hit the core of its body with that, I can make it brittle enough for a shockwave to shatter it." He looked at Bakugo, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. "And Kaken is a walking shockwave generator." Wade let out a low whistle. "Kid, that is a beautifully nerdy plan. I love it. But there's a problem. It's a bit of a hot zone down there. How do you plan to get from here to there without becoming a sludge cycle yourself?" "I need a distraction," Izuku said, finally turning to Wade. "A big one." Wade's masked eyes crinkled into a grin that was practically audible. He cracked his neck. Distraction? My dear boy, I am not a distraction. I am the distraction. It's my middle name, Wade Distraction Wilson. Before Izuku could respond, Wade had leapt onto the ledge of the roof. Hey, ugly! He screamed, his voice echoing across the plaza, cutting through the panic. Yeah, you! The giant mud pie with the captive anime rival. Nice eyes. Did you get them at a discount? Buy one, get a dozen free? The sludge villain's numerous eyes swiveled towards the source of the noise. Even the hero stopped, staring in bewilderment at the red and black-clad lunatic doing a jaunty little dance on the rooftop. Your mother was a hamster, and your father smelt of elderberries. Wade continued, now striking a dramatic pose. I've seen scarier things crawl out of a Taco Bell bathroom. You call yourself a villain? You look like the result of a tragic sewage plant orgy. It was working. The villain, its simple, malicious intelligence completely unable to process this sudden torrent of weaponized nonsense, was momentarily frozen, its attention fixed on Wade. That's your cue, green bean! Wade yelled without looking. Go! Make Daddy proud! Izuku didn't need to be told twice. He moved. He vaulted over the side of the building, his descent not a fall but a controlled slide. He hit the railing of the fire escape, his sneakers skidding on the metal, and used the momentum to launch himself across the alley to a window awning. He flowed over the urban landscape like water, a parkour tracer in a school uniform. Every move was precise, every landing calculated, a direct result of his 10 months in the scrapyard. He hit the ground running. The heat from the fires was intense, but he ignored it. Pain was just information. He kept to the edges of the chaos, a ghost in the smoke. The heroes were still staring at Wade, who was now singing a disturbingly off-key parody of a pop song, using a loose brick as a microphone. Izuku reached the noodle shop. He ripped the fire extinguisher from its mounting, the pin clattering to the ground. It was heavy, but his conditioning held. He took a deep breath, the acrid smoke stinging his lungs. He had one shot. He broke cover, sprinting towards the villain. Deku? He heard Bakugo roar from within the sludge, his voice filled with rage and disbelief. What the hell are you doing here? A tendril of sludge lashed out at him. Izuku didn't dodge. He slid, dropping low to the ground, the slimy appendage whipping over his head. He came up from the slide and aimed the nozzle. Kaken! Izuku yelled, his voice clear and commanding, utterly alien to Bakugo's ears. When I yell, full power! Blow him apart! He pulled the trigger. A massive cloud of frigid white gas erupted from the extinguisher, enveloping the core of the sludge villain. A horrifying, cracking sound echoed through the street as the supercooled liquid of the villain's body flash froze, turning from a viscous fluid to a brittle, crystalline solid. The eyes glazed over with frost. Now! Izuku screamed. Bakugo, for the first time in his life, did exactly what Izuku told him to do. He unleashed the biggest explosion he could manage. The shockwave, contained within the now brittle body of the villain, had nowhere to go. The frozen sludge didn't just break, it detonated outwards in a shower of icy, brown fragments. Bakugo fell to the ground, coughing and gasping for air. The rain, which had been threatening all evening, finally began to fall, washing the last of the sludge from the streets. Silence. Then, a single figure landed with a soft thud beside Izuku. Wade gave him a pat on the back that nearly sent him sprawling. Excellent work, apprentice. Great plan, solid execution, 10 out of 10 on the dramatic timing. You get a gold star. The heroes stared, their jaws hanging open. They looked at the defeated villain, at the freed hostage, and then at the quirkless, unassuming middle schooler holding an empty fire extinguisher, standing next to a wisecracking mercenary. And then, a booming voice cut through the stunned silence. I am here! All Might landed, his signature crater forming in the asphalt. He was a moment too late. He took in the scene, his permanent smile faltering for a fraction of a second as he saw the aftermath. His eyes, sharp and intelligent, pieced it together instantly. He looked at Izuku, not with pity or scorn, but with something else entirely. Later, after the paramedics had checked over Bakugo and the police were trying, and failing, to get a coherent statement from Wade, who was attempting to explain the situation through the medium of shadow puppets, Izuku found himself being led away from the scene by a gaunt, skeletal man. Toshinori Yagi led him to a quiet side street, the same one where he had lectured him what felt like a lifetime ago. He leaned against the wall, a trickle of blood dribbling from his mouth. "That was reckless, foolish, and utterly insane," All Might said, his voice a low rasp. He then looked Izuku directly in the eye, and a small, genuine smile touched his lips. "It was also the most brilliant and heroic thing I have seen in years." Izuku stood straighter, his hands clasped behind his back. The praise felt good, but it didn't overwhelm him. He had earned it. "You didn't just run in blindly," All Might continued, his gaze intense. "I watched from the rooftops. You analyzed the situation. You formulated a plan that utilized the environment and the hostage's own abilities. You coordinated with a partner to create a diversion. You did all of that without a quirk. Every hero on that scene was more powerful than you, but you were the only one who was actually a hero." He sighed, a plume of steam escaping his lips. "When we spoke on that rooftop, I told you to be realistic. I was wrong. I was projecting my own limitations, my own fears onto you. A hero's spirit is not defined by their power, but by their actions in the face of despair. Your body moved before you had a chance to think because that is who you are. But this time your mind moved first. You have the spirit of a hero, and now, you have the skills of one, too." "Young man, who trained you?" Izuku hesitated. Wade's instructions had been clear. "If anyone asks, just say you had a very motivated, very talkative American tutor who taught you interpretive dance and advanced spreadsheet management. They'll be too confused to ask follow-up questions." "A tutor," Izuku said carefully. "He taught me to see things differently." All Might nodded slowly, accepting the vague answer. "He taught you well." He stood up to his full, skeletal height, a fire igniting in his sunken eyes. "I came here today to find you. To correct my mistake, to tell you." His voice grew stronger, resonating with a power that had nothing to do with his muscles. "You can become a hero." The words hit Izuku just as hard as they would have 10 months ago. But this time, they weren't a desperate hope. They were a confirmation. Tears welled in his eyes, but they were tears of validation, not despair. He had proven it. He had proven it to himself, and he had proven it to All Might. "In fact," All Might said, placing a hand on Izuku's shoulder, "I believe you are the one I have been searching for. Young man, I deem you worthy to inherit my power." Izuku's brain, which had just processed a villain fight, tactical physics, and an emotional catharsis, screeched to a halt. "Inherit your power?" And so, All Might told him everything. He told him of the sacred torch, the crystallization of power passed down through generations. He told him of its name, One for All. "So let me get this straight," Wade said, pacing the floor of the warehouse. He had a half-eaten chimichanga in one hand, which he was using as a pointer. "The giant, muscle-bound golden boy of this universe is actually a walking skeleton who can inflate himself like a parade float. It's a side effect of a major injury," Izuku explained, sitting on a stack of tires and trying to catch his breath. Right, the injury." Wade waved the chimichanga dismissively. "And he has a magic, hand-me-down superpower that gets stronger every time it's given away. A stockpiling quirk? That's some classic shonen power scaling bullshit, and I love it." He took a massive bite of the chimichanga. "This is fantastic. The training arc just got a DLC expansion pack. The writers are really pulling out all the stops for this season." "Writers?" Izuku asked, confused. "Don't worry about it," Wade said, swallowing. "The point is, we have superpowers now. Plural. Because your power is my power, we're a team. The narrator's gonna have to up the budget for the fight scenes. We're gonna need so much more CGI. Green lightning everywhere. It's gonna be epic." Izuku looked at his own trembling hands. He had accepted All Might's offer without hesitation. It was the dream, the ultimate dream, handed to him. But now, the reality was sinking in. He said, "My body isn't ready." He said if I try to use it now, my limbs will blow off. Pop pop fizz fizz, oh what a relief it is, Wade sang. "Yeah, that tracks. You can't pour a gallon of high-octane awesome into a thimble-sized body and expect it not to go boom. He said you need to train your body to be a proper vessel, right? Yes. Izuku nodded. He gave me his American dream plan. It's a full workout and diet regimen. And he said, we need to clean Dagoba Municipal Beach Park. Wade stopped pacing. He slowly turned to face Izuku, the white eye patches on his mask narrowed into slits. He wants you to pick up trash. It's been an illegal dumping ground for years, Izuku explained. It's covered in junk. Cleaning it all in 10 months would be a Herculean task, proof that my body is ready. An eerie silence fell over the warehouse. Then Wade began to laugh. It started as a low chuckle and grew into a full-blown, maniacal cackle that echoed off the steel rafters. He laughed so hard he dropped his chimichanga, clutching his sides. Oh, that is precious! He wheezed, tears of mirth leaking from under his mask. Oh, Goldilocks, you beautiful, naive fool! He wants you to move junk. Kid, we've been living in a 10-acre junk pile for almost a year. We don't just move junk. We are artists of junk. A terrifying, brilliant gleam entered Wade's eyes. This isn't a chore, Izuku. This is an opportunity. We're not just going to clean that beach. We're going to turn it into our magnum opus. The next morning, Izuku stood before Dagoba Beach, and his heart sank. It was worse than he had imagined. Mountains of garbage, from broken refrigerators and televisions to entire cars, were piled as far as the eye could see, obscuring the sand and the ocean beyond. It was a monument to societal neglect. All Might, in his skeletal form, stood beside him, looking grim. A hero's job is not just fighting villains, young Midoriya, he said solemnly. It is also about restoring the world around us. This is your first act of public service. Right on time for the inspirational speech, Blondie, a cheerful voice called out. Wade sauntered up, dragging a massive, empty wheelbarrow. Don't worry, we've got this. Izuku and I are about to get our GTL on. Garbage, training, and larceny. Well, the last one is mostly my department. All Might eyed Wade with deep suspicion. This is your tutor? He whispered to Izuku. He's effective, Izuku mumbled. The training began. The first day, Izuku followed All Might's plan, arduously hauling smaller pieces of junk to a designated pickup area. It was backbreaking work. By noon, his muscles screamed in protest. That evening, after All Might had left, Wade unveiled his revised plan. Okay, the Boy Scouts method is noble, but inefficient, Wade declared, unrolling a crudely drawn schematic on the hood of a rusted-out pickup truck. We're thinking too small. This isn't just trash. It's raw material. Wade's plan was twofold. Part 1 was economic. He had Izuku sort the junk into piles, scrap metal, electronics, salvageable parts. Wade would then make calls to a series of increasingly shady scrap dealers, haggling with a ferocity that was both terrifying and impressive. The money they made went into their heroic enterprise, which mostly consisted of better training gear, repairs for Wade's gizmo, and a truly obscene quantity of chimichangas. Part 2 was where the true madness began. Why just lift a refrigerator when you can climb it? Wade asked. Why just drag a car when you can use it as the foundation for a work of art? Under Wade's direction, the beach stopped being a dump site and started becoming a training ground. They didn't just clear the junk, they rearranged it. They built towering, precarious obstacle courses out of stacked cars and crushed appliances. They created balance beams from rusted girders and monkey bars from exposed pipes. Dagoba Beach became a bigger, more dangerous version of the Takamatsu scrapyard. Izuku's training was no longer about simple strength. It was about functional, dynamic power. He would haul a washing machine to the top of a 20-foot pile of scrap, not just to move it, but as part of an insane parkour run. Then came the day All Might gave him the hair. After a particularly grueling month of work, All Might declared him ready. The ceremony was awkward. Plucking a strand of his golden hair, he held it out to Izuku. Eat this, Wade, watching from atop a pile of tires, nearly fell off laughing. Izuku, blushing to the roots of his own green hair, did as he was told. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a warmth spread through him, a feeling like his entire nervous system was being plugged into a power plant. A faint green energy, like static electricity, danced across his skin. I feel. Izuku started, his eyes wide. I feel full. Excellent! All Might boomed. Now, for your first test. Try to channel that power. Focus it. Feel it swell inside you and unleash it with a punch. Let me hear you scream, smash! Izuku faced the hulking, rust-eaten refrigerator. He planted his feet. He felt the power welling up, a roaring ocean inside him. He drew back his fist, took a deep breath, and screamed. Smaz! He didn't just punch the refrigerator. He punched through it. There was a deafening bang, and the appliance exploded in a shower of metal, insulation, and shrapnel. For a glorious, triumphant second, Izuku felt like All Might. Then the agony hit. He looked down at his arm. It was a mangled, purple ruin, bent at 3 different, unnatural angles. The bones were shattered. The pain was so immense it stole his breath. From the sidelines, All Might panicked, turning into his muscle form. Oh dear! I should have mentioned the recoil, Wade just sighed. Rookie mistake, he said, hopping down. He expertly grabbed Izuku's arm, ignoring his scream of pain, and began to set the bones with a series of sickening snaps and crunches. Okay, new plan. The punch it till it dies method is out. Your body is a glass cannon, kid. We need to turn you into a glass scalpel. The nature of the training changed again. The goal was no longer to build a vessel that could handle 100% of One for All. That was impossible in the time they had left. The new goal, Wade's goal, was to teach Izuku how to use just a tiny fraction of that infinite power and channel it into the skills he already had. Forget smash, Wade instructed, wrapping Izuku's newly set arm. Think flick. Think tap. Think nudge. Don't try to release the ocean. Just let a single drop out at a time. Izuku spent weeks just trying to summon the power without breaking himself. He learned to spread it throughout his entire body, a low-level hum of energy, rather than concentrating it in one limb. It was like trying to hold water in a sieve, but slowly, he got the hang of it. He could activate One for All at 1%, and his body would just ache instead of shattering. Then, he began to integrate it. He stood before a sheer wall of crushed cars, part of their latest obstacle course. A month ago, climbing it would have been a careful, arduous process. Now, he let 1% of OFA flow into his legs. He pushed off the ground, and instead of a normal jump, he soared 10 feet into the air. He landed silently on a car hood, his enhanced muscles absorbing the impact. He ricocheted from one surface to another, a green blur of motion, the crackle of OFA a faint whisper around him. He wasn't just climbing, he was dancing with gravity. He learned to channel a 2% burst into his fingertips to enhance his grip. He learned to use a 3% flick of his finger to launch a discarded bolt with the speed and impact of a rubber bullet. He sparred with Wade, his movements now preternaturally fast. He would dodge Wade's attacks not by inches, but by millimeters, OFA giving him that fractional split-second advantage. His fighting style evolved into something entirely new. It was a fusion of All Might's power and Deadpool's chaos. He was a phantom, using OFA-enhanced parkour to control the battlefield. He would disarm opponents from a distance with precisely aimed projectiles. In close quarters he used his Bakken, though now reinforced with strips of metal, each strike imbued with just enough power to shatter bone without turning his own arms to dust. He was a whirlwind of unpredictable motion, taunts, and brutally efficient, non-lethal attacks. On the morning of the UA entrance exam, the final truck hauled away the last load of scrap metal. Dagoba Beach was pristine. The sun rose over a clean, beautiful coastline, the waves lapping gently against the sand for the first time in years. Izuku stood there, watching the sunrise. He was no longer the scrawny, trembling boy from 10 months ago. He was lean, strong, his body a taut web of muscle. The green energy of One for All now felt like a part of him, a low, comfortable thrum beneath his skin. All Might arrived, his jaw dropping at the sight of the completely restored beach. He looked at Izuku, who stood tall and confident in the morning light. My boy, he said, his voice thick with emotion. You did it. You went plus ultra. We did it. Izuku corrected, a small smile on his face. He glanced over at Wade, who was trying to teach a flock of seagulls the lyrics to "Never Gonna Give You Up." All Might put a hand on his shoulder. "You are ready. Go forth, and show them what it means to be a hero." Izuku nodded. He was ready. He had the power of the symbol of peace thrumming in his veins and the training of the merc with a mouth ingrained in his bones. He was a paradox, a synthesis of the ultimate hero and the ultimate anti-hero. As he turned to leave for the exam, Wade jogged up to him. "Hey, Green Bean," he said, handing him a small, heavy pouch. "Exam essentials." Izuku opened it. Inside was a handful of ball bearings, a bag of fine sand, and a half-eaten chimichanga. "Just in case," Wade said with a wink. Izuku laughed, shaking his head. He looked towards Yuehai, the sun glinting off its distant windows. The exam wasn't a test. It was a stage. And he was about to give the performance of a lifetime. The gates of Yuehai were less like the entrance to a school and more like the threshold to a new reality. They were monolithic, gleaming structures of glass and steel that seemed to scrape the sky, a testament to the sheer, overwhelming prestige of the institution. A river of hopeful teenagers flowed through them, a chaotic current of nervous energy, bravado, and 1,000 different quirks simmering just beneath the surface. Izuku Midoriya was a stone in that river, while others chattered nervously, bounced on the balls of their feet, or glared at their competition. Izuku was calm. He walked with a steady, measured pace, his eyes sweeping across the crowd, the buildings, the very air itself. His senses, honed by 10 months of relentless, life-or-death training, were drinking in data. The girl with vine-like hair, vulnerable to fire, but excellent for grappling and area denial. The boy with engines in his calves, incredible linear speed, but likely poor cornering. The girl with pink skin, probably acid-based quirk, need to maintain distance. It was second nature, his analytical mind cross-referencing his observations with the lessons Wade had burned into his psyche. "Everyone's a puzzle, kid," Wade's voice echoed in his memory. "Most are a 4-piece jigsaw for toddlers. The fun ones are the 10,000-piece ones where all the pieces are the same color. Your job is to solve them faster than they can solve you." He saw Bakugo stomping ahead, his hands shoved in his pockets, radiating an aura of incandescent rage. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second. Bakugo's expression was a tempest of confusion and fury. He couldn't understand the change in Izuku. The timid, stuttering Deku he'd known his whole life was gone, replaced by this calm, centered person who looked back at him not with fear, but with a flat, analytical gaze. It was like a sheep he'd been kicking his whole life had suddenly looked back with the eyes of a wolf. It infuriated him. Izuku gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod and looked away, dismissing him. The internal scream of rage Bakugo must have let out was almost palpable. That was another of Wade's lessons. The best way to win a fight with an egomaniac is to act like they're not even important enough to fight. He was so engrossed in his threat assessment that he didn't notice the slight crack in the pavement in front of him. His foot caught. The old Izuku would have flailed, pinwheeled, and face-planted in the most humiliating way possible. The new Izuku reacted. Instinct took over. He didn't fight the fall, he embraced it. He tucked his shoulder, bent his knees, and converted the forward momentum into a fluid, silent parkour roll. He came up on one knee, his green hair barely ruffled, the entire motion taking less than a second. It was a movement he had practiced 1,000 times on the rusted hoods of cars at the scrapyard. "Whoa there! Are you okay?" A girl with a round, friendly face and a brown bob haircut was standing over him, her hand outstretched, her fingertips glowing with a soft pink light. He realized she had been about to use her quirk to stop his fall. "I'm fine," Izuku said, standing up and brushing a speck of dust from his knee. His voice was steady. "Thanks for the thought, though." "Oh. Wow, that was a really cool move," she said, her cheeks flushing slightly. "I'm Ochako Uraraka." "It's pretty nerve-wracking, huh?" "A little," Izuku admitted, offering a small, genuine smile. "I'm Izuku Midoriya." "Good luck in there, Uraraka-san." "You too, Midoriya-kun," she chirped, her bubbly energy a stark contrast to his focused calm. "Pay attention. You are here to take an exam, not to socialize." A sharp, commanding voice barked. Izuku and Uraraka turned to see the tall, bespectacled boy with engines in his calves marching toward them. He moved with the stiff precision of a soldier. He stopped before Izuku, chopping the air with his hand. "Your display just now was impressive," he said, pushing his glasses up his nose. "You recognized your own misstep and corrected it with outstanding physical acumen. I commend your awareness." This was a significant departure from the scolding Izuku had anticipated. The boy Tenya Ida had clearly expected a clumsy fool and was now recalibrating his assessment based on the silent roll. "Thank you," Izuku said simply. Ida nodded sharply. "However, this is a sacred institution. We must treat it with the utmost seriousness. Let us proceed with focus and dignity." With that, he marched off towards the auditorium, leaving a slightly bewildered Uraraka and a completely unfazed Izuku in his wake. The briefing hall was vast, dark, and filled with the low murmur of hundreds of anxious students. The lights went down, and a massive screen lit up behind a stage. "What's up, UA candidates? Welcome to today's live performance." A ridiculously tall man with a shock of spiky blonde hair, a leather jacket, and a tiny pair of sunglasses appeared on stage, striking a pose. The voice hero, present mic. "Everybody say hey." The hall was silent. Utterly, painfully silent. Izuku almost felt a pang of second-hand embarrassment for the hero. "Man, tough crowd," Wade's voice quipped in his head. "If this were my show, I'd have a hype man. And probably a t-shirt cannon." Present Mike, undeterred by the crickets, launched into his presentation. The screen behind him displayed the rules of the practical exam. A sprawling urban environment, 4 types of robots, 1-pointers, 2-pointers, 3-pointers, and a 4th type. As Present Mike explained the scoring system, Izuku's mind was already 2 steps ahead. He wasn't just listening to the rules, he was deconstructing the game. "Okay, so the stated objective is accumulating villain points by destroying robots," he mused internally, his eyes scanning the diagram. "But that's too simple. Yui isn't looking for wrecking balls, they're looking for heroes. A hero's job isn't to destroy. It's to save." The primary scoring system is a misdirection. A filter to weed out the thugs and the one-trick ponies. There has to be a secondary, hidden scoring system. He glanced at the silhouette of the 4th robot type on the screen. It was massive, towering over the others. "And finally, listeners, we have the 4th type of villain!" Present Mike boomed. "The arena trap. This behemoth is worth 0 points. That's right, 0. Think of it as a gimmick, a roadblock you should avoid at all costs." A low murmur went through the crowd. Izuku's eyes narrowed. There it is, he thought, a flicker of a smile touching his lips. The chaos factor. The narrative twist. It's not a roadblock. It's a test. Not a test of power, but of character. Engaging it is a tactical loss in the stated game, but a probable win in the real one. Rescue points. It has to be rescue points. "Excuse me, I have a question." The spotlight found Tenya Ida, who was standing ramrod straight, his hand raised high. "On the printout, there are clearly 4 types of villains listed. If this is a misprint, it is a gross oversight for Japan's most prestigious hero academy." "And you?" Ida turned, pointing a rigid finger directly at Izuku. "You have been muttering to yourself this entire time. It is distracting and unbecoming of a UA applicant. If you are not taking this seriously, then you should leave." All eyes turned to Izuku. The old him would have combusted on the spot. He would have turned beet red, stammered a dozen apologies, and wished for the floor to swallow him whole. The new Izuku simply looked up, his expression unreadable. He met Ida's glare without flinching. "I was analyzing the test parameters," Izuku said, his voice quiet but carrying in the sudden silence. "The 4th robot is not a misprint. It's an obstacle designed to test risk assessment and situational awareness. It's a variable intended to induce panic. Attacking it is a waste of time and energy, which is why it's worth 0 points. Its real purpose is to see how we react under pressure when faced with an overwhelming but ultimately pointless threat." He paused, then added, "As for the muttering, it's a cognitive tool. It helps me process information faster. My apologies if it distracted you." The entire hall was silent. Ida was completely wrong-footed, his mouth slightly agape. He had expected a flustered denial, not a calm, logical, and frankly brilliant tactical breakdown of the exam he was in the middle of taking. President Mike broke the silence. All right, excellent analysis from listener 7111. Thanks for the question. We're all on the same page now. Let's get to it. As our great school motto says, plus ultra, go beyond. Ida sat down, his face a mixture of embarrassment and grudging respect. He cast one last glance at Izuku, seeing him now not as a distraction, but as a serious competitor. The bus ride to Battle Center B was quiet. Izuku sat by himself, performing a mental inventory. On his back, a lightweight, custom-built pack designed by Wade. Inside, 2 reinforced Bakken, the high-voltage stun gun, and his rubber bullet pistol with 3 extra magazines. His costume was simple, dark green cargo pants, a black compression shirt, and reinforced running shoes. He looked more like an urban explorer than a hero in training. He stood before the massive gates of the mock city, a sprawling metropolis of concrete and glass. Other applicants were stretching, showing off their quirks, sizing each other up. Izuku simply breathed. He closed his eyes, feeling the low thrum of one for all, a coiled spring of power waiting in his muscles. It's just a bigger scrapyard, he told himself. The robots are just dumber paintballs. The objective is to win. Maximum effort. Maximum chaos. And start! President Mick's voice blared from hidden speakers. The massive gates slid open. For a second, everyone stood frozen, confused by the lack of a countdown. Everyone but Izuku. He didn't hesitate. The moment the word start hit his ears, he was moving. He activated one for all at a stable 3%, the familiar green static crackling around him. He shot through the gates like a cannonball, a green and black blur that left the other applicants standing in his dust. What's this? Listener 7111 is off the mark before anyone else. President Mick's voice boomed. That's what I'm talking about. Real battles don't have countdowns. The other students, jolted into action, began to pour into the city after him. But Izuku already had a 10-second head start, and he used every microsecond of it. He didn't run down the main street where the robots would be plentiful but the competition would be fierce. He veered immediately into a side alley, his feet barely seeming to touch the ground. Observation room. A dozen pro-heroes and UA faculty sat in a darkened theater, watching a wall of monitors that displayed feeds from every battle center. Hell, that kid's got guts. The R-rated hero, Midnight, commented with a smirk, watching Izuku's monitor. Or no sense of self-preservation. The grizzled homeroom teacher of Class 1A, Shota Aizawa, grumbled from his seat. He's fast, but he's heading into the side streets. He's isolating himself from the main clusters of villains. Perhaps, a cheerful, squeaky voice said. Principal Nizu, a small, white-furred creature that was either a mouse, a bear, or a dog, took a sip of tea. Or perhaps he understands that a hero does not always fight on the most crowded battlefield. Let's see what his strategy is, shall we? All Might, in his skeletal form, sat in the back, trying to look inconspicuous. He was sweating. What are you doing, my boy? Your tutor's influence is pronounced. Battle Center B. Izuku didn't need a crowded battlefield. He was a hunter, not a brawler. He leapt onto a dumpster, then to a fire escape, scrambling up the side of a 5-story building with the ease of a squirrel. From the rooftops, he had a panoramic view of the city. He could see the patrol patterns of the robots, the choke points, the areas where the other students were clumping together in a chaotic melee of explosions and flashy quirk usage. He spotted his first target. A lone one-pointer rolling down a deserted alley below. Predictable. Easy. He drew one of his Bakken. He dropped from the roof in a silent, controlled fall, OFA cushioning his landing. The robot's single red optic swiveled towards him, its metallic voice screeching. Target acquired! It was too slow. Izuku was already moving, a fluid shadow. He slid under its clumsy charge, the Bakken a blur in his hand. There was a sharp crack as the reinforced wood connected with a hydraulic line in the robot's leg. The machine seized, its leg locking up. As it tilted off balance, Izuku sprang up, jamming the twin prongs of his stun gun against an exposed power conduit on its back. A shower of blue sparks erupted, and the robot's optic flickered and died. 1 point. No wasted energy. No collateral damage. He was gone before the robot's corpse even finished clattering to the ground. He moved through the city like a phantom. He used the rooftops and alleys to bypass the main skirmishes, picking off isolated robots with surgical precision. For a pair of 2-pointers guarding an intersection, he used his pistol. 2 sharp thwacks as the rubber bullets struck their optical sensors, blinding them. He then dropped down, disabled their legs with his Bakken, and delivered the final electronic shutdown with his stun gun. 5 points. He encountered a massive 3-pointer, a tank-like machine with Gatling guns for arms. It had another applicant pinned down behind a car. The applicant, a boy who could shoot lasers from his navel, was panicking. Izuku didn't engage directly. He scrambled up a nearby building, staying out of the robot's line of fire. "Hey, Rust Bucket!" he yelled from the roof. The robot's head swiveled up, its guns whirring as it tried to target him. "I've seen scarier toasters! Did your mother have a T-800 for a father, or was he a Roomba? You've got the personality of one." The robot, its programming likely ill-equipped to handle nonsensical taunts, fired a volley of shots that went wide, chewing up the concrete of the rooftop. This was the opening the naval laser boy needed. He fired a powerful blast that struck the 3-pointer in its now exposed back panel. The robot staggered, and Izuku seized the opportunity. He leapt from the roof, landing on the robot's shoulders, and drove his second Bakken deep into the exposed wiring, twisting it like a key. The machine convulsed and collapsed. 8 points. The naval laser boy stared up at him, utterly bewildered. Izuku just gave him a 2-fingered salute and melted back into the alleys. Observation room. The teachers were silent, their eyes glued to monitor 7111. "His style," Cementos rumbled. "It's incredibly efficient. He's not using a strength-based quirk, but he's racking up points faster than some of the heavy hitters. He is not fighting the machines," Nisa said, his black eyes gleaming with delight. "He is dismantling them. He identifies a weakness and exploits it with minimal effort, and the psychological warfare, while wasted on machines, it is a clear indicator of his training. He is actively creating openings through distraction." Aizawa leaned forward, his usual bored expression replaced with one of intense focus. "There's no hesitation. No wasted motion. The way he moves, the way he uses his support gear, it's the fighting style of an underground hero. Or a mercenary. Where did a middle schooler learn to fight like that?" All Might sank lower in his chair, pulling his collar up. "Please don't use the sand, please don't use the sand, please don't use the sand," he chanted internally. Izuku had 45 points. The exam was more than halfway over. He was a well-oiled machine, flowing through the city, racking up points with a quiet, deadly efficiency that was in stark contrast to the loud, destructive chaos erupting all around him. He was about to line up a shot on another 2-pointer when the ground began to shake. It started as a low rumble and grew into a seismic tremor that rattled the windows of the buildings. A shadow fell over the street, vast and absolute. From around a corner, the 0-pointer emerged. It was breathtakingly huge, a skyscraper of green metal and black armor that dwarfed the surrounding buildings. Its single, massive red eye scanned the cityscape, and its colossal arms could level a block with a single swipe. The effect was instantaneous. The other applicants, who had been fighting with such bravado moments before, turned and fled. The air was filled with screams of pure, unadulterated terror. "It's the arena trap! Run! We can't fight that thing!" Izuku stood his ground, hidden in the mouth of an alley. He looked up at the mechanical titan, and he didn't feel fear. He felt analytical. 0 points. His mind raced, channeling Wade's narrative analysis. An obstacle. A set piece. Its purpose is to scatter the herd and test our nerve. Engaging is illogical from a points perspective. He was about to slip away and hunt for more points in the ensuing chaos when he heard it. A small, pained cry. Ow! His head snapped to the source of the sound. It was her. Uraraka. She was trapped, her leg pinned beneath a large slab of concrete, a casualty of the robot's collateral damage. The 0-pointer was lumbering directly towards her, its massive foot raised to crush everything in its path. In that moment, the points, the strategy, the game, it all vanished. A girl was in trouble. That was the only variable that mattered. The heroic instinct that had sent him charging at the sludge villain's surge, but this time, it was guided by 10 months of brutal training. He didn't charge. He acted. Step 1: Diversion. He drew his pistol, aimed at a large metal sign on a building to the 0-pointer's left, and fired. The rubber bullet struck the sign with a loud clang that echoed through the street. Simultaneously, he yelled at the top of his lungs, his voice sharp and clear. "Hey, junk heap! Your warranty is expired!" The robot's massive head turned, its optic focusing on the source of the noise, its programming momentarily diverted by the unexpected stimulus. It was only a second, but a second was all he needed. Step 2: Extraction. He activated one for all at 5%, the green lightning crackling more intensely around him. He shot across the street, a blur of motion. He reached Uraraka's side. The slab of concrete was massive. He couldn't lift it, not without using 100% and shattering his arms. He didn't need to. He saw a long, discarded pipe nearby. Leverage. A basic principle of physics. He jammed the pipe under the slab, placed a smaller chunk of rubble beneath it to act as a fulcrum, and put all his weight on the end. The slab lifted just enough. "Pull your leg out! Now!" he commanded. Uraraka, wide-eyed and terrified, did as she was told. Izuka pulled her clear, his movements efficient and sure. "Can you stand?" "I think so," she stammered. "Good. Get back. Get as far away as you can." He helped her to her feet and gave her a gentle push, sending her stumbling away from the danger zone. Step 3: Takedown. The 0-pointer had reacquired its original target, its massive foot now descending. Uraraka was clear, but the robot was still a threat to the entire area. He had to stop it. Smashing it was out of the question. He wasn't All Might. But he wasn't supposed to be. He was a saboteur. A dismantler. His eyes scanned the environment, and he saw it. A huge, thick plate of steel, probably the side of a destroyed building, lying at a perfect 45-degree angle against a pile of rubble. It was a ramp. He took a deep breath, channeling OFA into his legs, pushing it to an unstable but manageable 8%. The power screamed through him, a barely contained hurricane. He sprinted towards the makeshift ramp, his feet pounding against the asphalt. He hit the plate at full speed, the metal groaning under the force, and launched himself into the air. He soared, a green comet aimed directly at the 0-pointer's head, which was now level with him. He landed on its massive, flat-topped head with a thunderous clang that rattled his teeth. He didn't stop. He drew both Bakken. With OFA still coursing through his arms, he delivered a rapid series of devastating strikes to the robot's single, giant optic sensor. The reinforced wood, empowered by his quirk, struck with the force of sledgehammers. The thick, red lens cracked, then shattered, showering the street below with crystalline shards. The robot reeled, blinded, its arms flailing uselessly. But Izuka wasn't done. He spotted a maintenance hatch on the top of its head, held in place by 6 large bolts. He holstered his Bakken, drew his pistol, and fired 6 perfect shots. The rubber bullets, imbued with the kinetic energy of his quirk, struck the bolts like cannonballs, shearing them off. He ripped the hatch open, revealing a dense nest of wiring and processors. He didn't hesitate. He jammed the stun gun inside and held down the trigger. 1,000,000 volts of electricity surged through the 0-pointer's central nervous system. It convulsed violently, a shudder running through its entire colossal frame. The lights dimmed. The whirring of its internal mechanisms sputtered and died. With a final, groaning screech of tortured metal, the giant slumped forward, deactivated, its head crashing into the side of a building just feet from where Uraraka had been trapped. Izuka stood on its head, breathing heavily, the green lightning of one for all slowly fading from his body. He was exhausted, his muscles screaming from the strain of 8%, but he was unbroken. The silence that followed was absolute. The other applicants who had fled were now creeping back, their faces a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. They stared at the deactivated giant, then at the small, unassuming boy standing atop its head like a triumphant conqueror. They hadn't seen a display of raw power. They had witnessed a tactical execution. The buzzer blared, signaling the end of the exam. Observation room. No one spoke. The heroes and teachers stared at the monitor, their minds struggling to process what they had just seen. The boy hadn't overpowered the obstacle. He had analyzed it, dismantled it, and humiliated it. Principal Mises set his teacup down with a soft click. A wide, slightly terrifying smile spread across his face. "Well now," he said, his voice filled with unrestrained glee. "That was unexpected." Aizawa was leaning so far forward he was nearly out of his chair. The corner of his mouth was turned up in a tiny, almost imperceptible smirk. "He's a problem," he stated, but there was no malice in his voice. It was a statement of fact, and one that held a deep, deep well of interest. Completely irrational, but logical. All Might finally let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding for a full minute. He wiped his sweaty face with a handkerchief. His successor hadn't used 100% smash. He hadn't broken a single bone. He had used his power intelligently, precisely, and combined it with a set of skills that were both terrifying and astonishingly effective. He was proud. And he was utterly terrified. That American tutor of his, Toshinori thought, a fresh wave of sweat beading on his brow. "I need to have a word with him." Mise clapped his tiny paws together. "A perfect score on the rescue assessment, of course. And with his 45 villain points, I do believe we have our top scorer for this year." He looked around the room, his black eyes twinkling with chaotic delight. "I must admit, my dear colleagues, I am very much looking forward to seeing what kind of hero this young man becomes. It seems our school year is about to become significantly more interesting."